Hi, I'm Jeremy Crosby.
And I'm Nick Boucher. We're the hosts for the program that's all about your city, Talking Fitchburg.
Every day, we pull together the news, events, and information you need to stay on top of what's happening in the city of Fitchburg.
Find Talking Fitchburg on cable TV, Roku, Amazon Fire, Apple TV, and our live stream on the web. Plus, you can view all our headlines and stories on Facebook, YouTube, and our video on demand service. This is your city.
Keep up with Talking Fitchburg and the issues that affect you and your neighbors.
Want to know what's happening in your city? Get Notify Me messages from the City of Fitchburg. Visit fitchburgwi.gov on your computer or mobile device and select the big Notify Me button on the left. Enter your email and/or phone number, whichever is best for you to get notifications. Scroll down the list and select all the topics you're interested in to receive email or text messages about. You'll be notified every time one of your topics is updated. Sign up for Notify Me, one more way to keep up with your Fitchburg government.
The first order of business will be on the up there on the Zoom left-hand corner. Jim.
Good morning.
Hello, Jim. Next is Phil. Phil.
Good morning.
All right, Ryan, you're next.
Hello, hello.
Hello, Ryan. Joe, bottom right-hand corner.
Here.
Don Krim, middle.
Here.
Ryan Husselman.
Here.
And in the room with me, Kelly.
Yeah, here. Did you get Andy?
No, I didn't. I'll come back to it. Thank you.
Ross Kaler.
Ross Kaler. Ross Kaler in the room with me. I'm Mark Hamilton. And Andy Potts, you are on the line, correct?
Yep, I'm here.
Okay. All right. We're going to go ahead and get started. We've got a ambitious agenda today. We'll try and get through all of it and then move forward on other things relating mainly to our planning process. First of all, I'd like to entertain a discussion. You all got the minutes from June 4th of 2024. Did you everybody, I assume everybody got a chance to take a look at them. Are there any discussion points on the minutes? Okay, hearing none. We will move to take action. All those in favor of those minutes signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Minutes are approved. Next is public appearances for any non-agenda items. And I don't see anybody in the room here. Have you guys had anybody weigh in on FACTv they'd like to speak? Okay, hearing none. We will move on to our agenda items. First and foremost is the Bicycle and Pedestrian Commission restructuring. Phil, you're up.
Sure. Yeah, I can give a little bit of overview here, Mark. If there's more that you want discussed here, I'll need you to weigh in on that. We talked about a lot of this at our June meeting. We have our full membership with Jim's addition to the group. There is, of course, the addition of pedestrian concerns to this commission, and that's something that'll be the next agenda item, so I won't talk about that at all. One of the biggest changes, as we've talked about, is that there are going to be 2 additional meetings added. Per the June meeting, the group just discussed adding 1 meeting this year in September and going to a full slate of 8 meetings next year. I know, Mark, I'm not sure whether you wanted to try to add 2 additional meetings this year as well, or just go with the 7, but that's something that right now we've got the group agreed on 7 meetings. So the next one, September 3rd, has been added to the calendar, and you'll all be getting a calendar invite for that shortly. If you want to add an 8th, that would be an item to discuss here.
Okay.
But for the most part, that's the bulk of the changes. Yeah, it's just kind of getting the commission up to speed with its new set of responsibilities.
Okay, thank you, Phil. I will add one piece to your thing. I would like to see us, as I was looking last week, we may add a November meeting to focus on the plan and get this plan moving. So when we have a consultant, but let's get through September, see where we are, and then we may ask for a November meeting. I agree with the 8 meetings going through starting next year, and we can work those dates later. So stay tuned on November, but yes, our next meeting is September 3rd, and our total focus on that is going to be the bike and pedestrian plan update. So we'll come to that in a minute for more discussion. So thank you, Phil, for that update. The next item I'd like to turn to is item B on the 4B on the agenda, and that is incorporating our pedestrian role into this commission. And we had our new member Jim join in March, and I tasked him 2 weeks ago to offer an update on how he visioned, that's the wrong word, Jim, I'm sorry, but how he pedestrian activities and more importantly moving around the city. And so Jim, I'm going to turn this over to you and let you kind of talk about it before we get into our plan. So the floor is yours.
Great, thank you very much. Appreciate that. Good morning. So, you know, we talk about making cities more pedestrian friendly and places where people want to walk. People want to walk to businesses. People want to walk to their jobs. People want to walk to medical appointments. And things we can do to make things more pedestrian friendly. I think it's going to require a little bit of rethinking from this commission and from the city. Because I think looking through the plan, from the 2017 plan, I think there's a lot of focus on vehicles with wheels, be it motor vehicles and bicycles. And I think there's not a lot of, there's some thinking about it, but if we really think about what does it take to make a city pedestrian friendly and walkable, one of the key things is sidewalks. And I know there's been some pushback, and I know there was actually a resolution I read in the 2017 plan about not adding sidewalks in new areas. But sidewalks and different pedestrian paths, I think, are really important if you're going to have pedestrian-friendly areas. And I know, if you're on a bike, hey, the street might be okay, but not so much for pedestrians. And I did send out a couple resources yesterday, kind of talking about the importance of pedestrian paths, pedestrian walkways, sidewalks, other different things. The other thing I think we need to take a real close look at, and this is probably when consulting with the traffic engineers and other different things, is the roundabouts. Because roundabouts, if they're designed correctly, can be pedestrian friendly, but if they're not designed properly, not the most pedestrian friendly thing in the world, and also not really friendly to those of us with disabilities. An actual intersection you can hear with cars coming in a parallel lane, where in a roundabout things cars don't necessarily slow down all the time, so it's a little bit trickier to get something where you can cross because you can't hear the car stopping. So I think this is going to take a little bit of creative thinking on our part as a commission. I think it's going to take a little bit of kind of rethinking how we approach things, and I think it's going to take a long-term goal. I don't think something we can just flip a switch and just say, oh yeah, we're pedestrian friendly now. It's being creative, working with the landowners to say, hey, how can we get sidewalks and get pedestrian-friendly walkways so in a way that satisfies them and doesn't upset them as far as the cost and other different things. So, I open this to questions and comments and thoughts, because all of you have much more knowledge about this than I do. But the research I've done kind of just suggests this is kind of the direction we need to go. So what are your thoughts? What are your comments?
Don't everybody jump in at once.
I can start. Jim, I appreciated the materials you sent, and especially that information about the roundabouts. I found as something that we really didn't think about in designing, and that it in general isn't part of the process, is the people, considering people with disabilities and how they can navigate those spaces. So I really appreciate that. Something else that I wanted to draw your attention to, I don't know if this is a resource that you have a lot of familiarity with, but the America Walks program, their Week Without Driving is going to be September 30th to October 6th, and Fitchburg will be participating in that challenge. So
That's great. That's terrific.
that, I think that'll be a good way for us to acknowledge the 40% of Fitchburg residents who don't drive, and to navigate the city in other ways.
Well, perhaps we can help or suggest some type of event to celebrate that as it goes forward. We have time, it's our September meeting, if it's the 30th.
Yeah.
And so I think that's a good suggestion and a good idea. Jim, I want to add too, I started looking at your document, and roundabouts, yes, I'm concerned about roundabouts, even on my bike and my car, both. But I think that's something we need to talk about. We've got Ross here, and it's a long-term solution. It's not a today solution. But the other one I didn't hear you mention was BRTs. And I'm concerned about, as BRT comes to Fitchburg, how it's going to be dealt with to get people out into the middle of that street. But the other thing is, I'd like to see us work to connect our city, like we've done with the trails, with walking and pedestrian options. And again, these are long-range things. But the last piece of all is we got to make our goals realistic and hold ourselves accountable, as well as our city leaders. So I think we're just laying the groundwork here as we go forward, but that's kind of my sense. Do others of you have comments on the commission?
Let me just speak to the BRT real quick. It is really important to get public, one of the things that's really important for walkable cities is, public transport to businesses. And right now, if somebody wanted to take a public transit to City Hall or the library, it's not an option. And so, again, these are all long-term things and things we need to think about, and long-term goals. But making sure people can take public transit to areas that are walkable and have businesses, I think are really, really important. And that kind of helps everyone. If somebody can take a bus to a restaurant, they're not using a parking space, and then walk half a block, they're not using a parking space. They're so it really benefits everyone. So, but making sure that public transit is there and can get to a majority of the businesses, get within walking distance of the majority of the businesses, and that's something that I don't think Fitchburg currently has.
So more to come on that one. Others folks have comments. Don, you were part of this last time, and I know you have a commitment you said at 8 o'clock. Any comments you have, I'll put you on the spot.
No worries. Putting me on the spot is just okay. When I think about the roundabouts, and I appreciate, Jim, you bringing it up, I have some concerns, but I don't know yet how to channel them. And the reason I say that is, as I move to Green Bay, there are many more roundabouts. And so I have fallen on my bike, so I now get off and walk. But I do notice the roundabouts are set up to accommodate biking. They're a little further down the way you go around the loop. So I'm becoming more familiar with it. And as we build out Fitchburg, I'm noticing more and more the roundabouts. It's interesting because as I compare some of them, for example, there's a new roundabout on Greenway Cross that was placed in that feels larger than it should be because people are coming from Greenway Cross to go straight, but you can turn in it's sort of more of an industrial street, or you can turn into the Park Bank / Starbucks parking lot, which queues up And that roundabout feels larger than most. So it's very tight as one car goes through. I'm not sure I would be comfortable as a biker going through. So I'm still trying to educate myself on the uniformity of the roundabouts, the 2 lanes versus 1 lane, is it wide enough? And as a pedestrian in that particular one, I would be very concerned about crossing. So Jim, your mention about the roundabouts and pedestrian safety as well as biking has really perked my ears, and I'll be looking at the plan with that in mind. So that's all I have to offer right now, but concerned and still learning. And maybe it's an education piece around roundabout use, but definitely something that we're going to have to prepare the community better for usage, and some education will be helpful.
Good points, and
So let me ask a quick.
Go ahead, Tim. Sorry.
Can I ask a quick question? So it's my understanding that people who are on bicycles kind of get through roundabouts in one of 2 ways. A, kind of pretending to be a car and kind of going at the same route as the cars, or B, getting off their bike and kind of just carrying their bike and crossing as a pedestrian. When all of you encounter roundabouts now in Fitchburg, how do you navigate those roundabouts? Do you act as a pedestrian, or do you act as a car?
Can I jump in here?
Go ahead,
I'll jump in again.
Go ahead, Don.
Just because I got to leave. I'll jump in again, Jim. So if you think about the way the roundabouts are being built, in acting like it's sort of a car and a bike, because you don't go in the inner circle. There is a entryway that's probably, 10 feet before you get to the circle, that takes you over to, I think, like a crosswalk. And then you go through one of the intersections, and then about 10 feet in, you come out onto the road. So it's not sort of in the inner circle, it's bike combination pedestrian, but somebody else that has more technical terms for how you navigate it might be able to better explain.
Sure. I'll say for me, it depends on how the roundabout is built, and it depends on what the road lane markings are like. So the Greenway Cross roundabout, Don, that you were talking about, I'm looking at that on Google Maps right now. That doesn't really have that sort of, it doesn't have that ramp for bikes to exit off onto the sidewalk to go around the roundabout that way. So if I'm doing Greenway Cross as a cyclist, I'm probably staying on the road. If I'm doing the roundabout that we just put up at Lacey and Seminole 2 years ago, that one does have those bike ramps so that you're in the bike shoulder on Lacey Road as you're approaching. But then once I get to the roundabout, I'm going to try to actually exit off onto that sidewalk and go around the roundabout that way. So it really does depend on just traffic considerations and the construction of the lanes and roundabout there.
We have Ross Kaler in the room. I want to you had your hand up.
Yeah, Phil and Dawn basically covered what I was going to say, but okay. Yeah, it just depends on if there's bike lanes on the road, if we build those bike bypasses, and I think Phil and Dawn covered it.
So what we'll do with this, folks, is to move us along. We will have further discussion on roundabouts, I think, learning the best practices. For one, it depends on what's going on with the traffic. I will go in the pedestrian lane, or once in a while go through like a car. It just depends on what's going on out there. But I do agree the one up by Park Bank is an issue. So we'll take a look we'll do the inventory, I think, on those. And we've got Ross here who will be a part of our group, and we'll move forward. So any other comments? Yes, Kelly?
I have more of a question. In the material that Jim sent us about roundabouts, they talked about hawks as an option to make roundabouts accessible for pedestrians or people with disabilities. Fitchburg doesn't use hawks at all, is that correct?
We don't have any right now. No.
Okay.
We've been talking about locations for some, and just for context, a hawk.
Yeah, what's a hawk?
A hawk is basically an RRFB, a rectangular rapid flashing beacon, but it is a red light function. You have to stop. It's not just a yield. but it's pedestrian activated or bike activated or whatever. And cars have to stop at it.
Are they more expensive than RRFBs?
Normally they are, because you normally have a mast that goes out over the road, and most of the RRFBs we put in are just posts on the side.
Okay.
So they are usually a little bit more expensive.
So the first assignment to our group is Jim sent the stuff out yesterday. Everybody please take a look at it. I will be honest, I haven't gotten through it, but I will get through it. It sounds like Kelly's looked at it. Take a look at that as we get ready for our September meeting, and we'll have further discussion. Anything else, Jim, you want to add for the group about pedestrian activities?
No, I mean, I think, like I said, I think we have a long way to go, but I think there's, the fact that we're considering these issues and thinking about these issues, and, talking about them before we make them next plan gives me hope.
Okay. Well, I thank you for your comments, and if there's nobody else with comments about it, we'll move to the plan update, and we're a little ahead of schedule.
Mark?
Yes, sorry.
Mark, can I just, so I kind of neglected to update Ross on the agenda here. I was going to have him, so Andy had asked for Ross to give an update on the RRFBs that our previous transportation engineer, Andrew, gave some info on a couple years ago, and I was just going to have Ross do this part of the staff update, but I didn't tell him, hey, show up towards the end of the meeting. So I know Dawn's got to leave early. I want to respect her time, but I wonder if it makes sense to move at least my staff update portion up in the agenda to now, so that Ross can get back to his desk after giving that update, or if we still want to do the plan discussion first.
We're a flexible group. Ross, you're on. Because I've been talking to Ross too about RFPs, so go ahead.
Yeah, so basically we had those two RRFBs, one at the Cannonball Path crossing on Seminole Highway, and then the other outside Forest Edge Elementary School on at Mizuna and Brassica. Both of those are in the process of being installed. I went to call Mark Hodel this morning about it, but he's off. I think he has a doctor's appointment this morning, so I couldn't get a hold of him. But they're both going to be installed. They're either installed already or going to be installed this week is the schedule. So those are the two that we have bought and actually have planned. I know, Mark, you emailed me about a couple of other locations, and we kind of had some kind of wait and see how these ones we're installing right now work, right, kind of conversations. So,
and that's fine. I'll share with the group the others that I raised. I raised Wayland Road. I continue to get complaints from colleagues of mine who ride the Badger State Trail across Wayland, and I know the problem with that is you're going 50 coming at it both ways, and then you've got that turn off Seminole Highway, so it may be a logistical issue. Second of all, the worst one is the McCoy Cyene Cap City Trail crossing as it goes east towards Monona, and that may be getting addressed as part of the road construction down there. And then I raised a third one, across the diagonal crossing across Seminole. I've heard numerous complaints about that, so I'd like those three on the list. I know you guys are doing, you folks are doing budgets now, so we need to at least put something in there and then figure out. But I think the worst one of the three is the diagonal crossing coming across Seminole. Now that there's a new road there, traffic's going to be going faster. So,
and just for your budget comment, these would be capital improvements, so they would not be in the operating budget. Okay. They would be in the capital improvement plan, which is already, we do that before the budget every year.
So do those of you, Kelly's got her hand up, I was going to say, go ahead. Any other suggestions or comments? Andy, you had comments too, but Kelly had her hand up first, so you're on, Kelly.
I just wanted to find out how soon we expect the RFB on Cyene in Swan Creek near the bike path, near up near Cheryl by the Quick Trip, the broken one.
Oh, yes. So that one was obviously installed when that construction was done. It got hit by a car a month and a half, 2 months ago. We're waiting on a new unit from the electrical supplier for that project.
Okay.
We just had the same contractor do that work since they had just installed it like 8 months before.
And is that the same thing with the one going across Lacey on Badger State? There's been plastic over it for probably 3 months now.
Oh,
Zigzag
so
crossing.
that one we're waiting on power for the street lights because those ones don't run off solar, they run off the power for the street lights.
Okay.
And MG&E needs to run the services for those street lights still. So we're waiting on MG&E for those.
Other comments from the committee about any particular, what we see as risky intersections is what the word I'm going to use. Andy, you
Andy had his hand raised.
Yeah, go ahead, Andy.
Yeah, thanks. Since Good was one that kind of brought this topic up in the first place. So I think the question I had was that I know previously when Andrew had looked at initially we'd looked at putting a location on Seminole Highway, and there's the debate between Cap City Trail versus Cannonball. And so he had done some traffic counts both on the path and on Seminole Highway and speed counts and all that. And then at the same time, my understanding is he went through and looked at most of the intersections in Fitchburg, like the ones that you've mentioned, Mark, I think were all on his list. I believe he did that work of at least doing ped counts and doing traffic counts, doing speed. So I guess Ross, probably somewhere in his files, you should be able to find at least kind of an initial start to doing the analysis of that. So that's really why I brought it up, was it felt like Andrew had done that work at one point in time, and then I think when he left, it just kind of got lost in the shuffle. So I think a lot of the groundwork's done, is kind of my point. But then also, as I've been reading through like the facilities design manual, and I think this is probably something that we can incorporate into our next discussion about what we're doing with the plan. Just kind of looking at, based on the federal guidance and on Wisconsin DOT guidance, in terms of like when is an RFB appropriate versus a hybrid pedestrian / hawk type setup. Kind of rereading that design manual, I think some of the places where we like currently have the flashing beacons are actually not appropriate uses. The prime example would be where Badger State Trail crosses County Highway M. Just given the speeds and the traffic patterns, that would actually be a prime location for a hawk instead of the current flashing beacon. So just something to consider as we go through. I just don't want to reinvent the wheel, since I think a lot of this work was done.
Yeah, so I do have all that data from our previous traffic counts. We've got a pretty good library of that information. One thing, since we were talking about the Cannonball Path and those two crossings on Seminole Highway, that location for the RRFB at the Cannonball Path crossing didn't actually meet warrants when Andrew did that previous count. And I redid a count, and it meets warrants now. And I think that's kind of the same case for a lot of those other locations. So we do have that data, and we can say, oh, the highest traffic is here. So this would be where we should start, but I do think we would still have to do new traffic counts at each location, which isn't a big deal. It's, mostly automated.
We would. One mitigating factor when Andrew did those counts a few years ago is that at that point, I think there was construction going on Cannonball, and so pedestrian bike traffic was pretty significantly reduced. And so that was why a new count was warranted there. It was because that one had been during a particularly low traffic season for that trail.
And frankly, also, a lot of the counts that Andrew did, our traffic was still being impacted by COVID. I basically am treating all of our 2020 and 2021 traffic counts as junk, because they're just not really relevant to the new counts we're seeing now.
Well, again, our RFBs are a part of a safety factor, and so I think we need to continue to be diligent on this. And if you can continue to give us an update. And folks, if you have others you want to suggest or raise, Jim, your hand's up. Go ahead.
I'm just wondering how many of these new RFBs have audio access, if any?
None of the ones that we currently have audio, but that is something for any new install that we're at least going to be considering. And then that'll be
Thank you.
That'll be required with ProWag when that gets passed, and I'm not 100% sure of the schedule for ProWag, but a lot of our design consultants are already taking that into account with their designs they're doing now.
Okay. Well, again,
thank you.
Yes, Kelly.
One more question. You talked about the warrants. Is there a cutoff number where you say, oh, this count is high enough that an RRFB is not appropriate, it has to be a hawk? Is there some sort of a delineator in there?
There is, the way that the guidance is written, it's not a hard cutoff, but like Andy was saying, there's, the guidance numbers for a hawk are usually higher than for an RRFB, so it's kind of guidance that you move in that direction as traffic and speeds increase.
But in terms of pedestrian safety and people with disabilities, a hawk is far preferable to an RRFB, correct?
Yes, applied in the correct situations. With all these improvements, there can be issues with over application. If we have an RFB at every single crosswalk, then people start ignoring them and they're not useful at the places where we actually need them.
So a lot more to come on this. I think, again, Ross, you've been nominated to be a part of our work group as we go forward. And I'd like to invite you to continue to come to these meetings, particularly to have discussions like this. I'd also like to hear, as you get ready to plan out your next series of road construction or updates, that we get you in front of this group as Andrew, your predecessor, Andrew, everybody keeps talking about, used to do. So keep you engaged in our process. Is there anything else on pedestrian concerns before we go into the plan update? I know we lost Dawn. Ross, you can stay or you can go back to work and see. It's your call.
All right, I will probably head out then. Thank you, guys.
So thank you. All right. I'm going to shift to the what I hope we spend the rest of we got some other updates at the end, but Phil, do you have any other updates before we go into the planning discussion?
Yeah, I guess just related to the plan discussion here, we do still have the RFP for this bike and ped plan update on our RFP on Quest CDN. This is where we place documents for bids. That document, we're looking for responses to come in by this Friday. I don't have any yet, but I have spoken with one firm that does plan to bid, so we'll have at least one bid this time, which is better than the first go around. I'm hoping we get more than that so we can compare some against each other. But yeah, this Friday is when we'll know how many firms are actually bidding in this plan, and then we'll move forward with review of the proposals and interviews and all that.
Okay, thank you. All righty. I'm going to move us into the next, to stay on the plan. And no other update from you, Phil?
No, that's all.
Okay, all right, thank you. Again, we're moving around the agenda a little bit today. I'm going to move to 4C, which is the bike and pedestrian plan update. And with that, I want to give a couple of overview comments to kick us off. One is I sent you folks some stuff a couple of weeks ago and asked you to all review the plan again. It's 85 pages of plan and 100 pages of appendices. I know you haven't gone through all that because I'm still having trouble getting through all that, but I think it's important that we understand what's in there. As I look at this, there were some things that were not even around at that point in time, like B cycles, or at least the B cycles as they are today. And I think we need to look at what's in there, that what has been changed, what we have done. We've done one heck of a lot of things, and we ought to be proud of that. But I think we need to look at it moving forward as things have changed both within our country. This plan is also 8 years old. And many of you, Joe and Andy and Don, all served on putting this plan together. And so I think we've got a good, I'm drafting, I sent you a list of who I'd given to the city to serve on this group, and essentially it is this committee, as well as Ross from Public Works, a representative from Bike Fitchburg, most likely Steve Arnold or Tony Hartman, a chamber ad hoc, other city people ad hoc, and we want to move this forward. We need to map out our plan to plan, so to speak. We need, but in the meantime, while we're waiting for the consultant, we can start going through this plan, because we already have. You folks all ranked things last fall and said, number 5B, for example, we're done. We don't need to focus on it anymore. Or 5C, I remember one that Kelly had brought up about lighting the bike trails. Well, it never went any further than sitting in that plan. So we need to look at all this again and decide, are we going to leave something in? Are we going to take it out? And while I've done a lot of plans in my career, you always have stretch goals, but you also want to be realistic of what you can achieve, and you want to track what you're doing. So we need to be creative. I'm going to use this group. If there's anybody else that you feel should be serving, let me know. I want to have 1 to 2 focus meetings, hopefully before the end of the year, only on the contents of the plan. In addition, I want us to be have a realistic to-do list. Because I put together a year ago a plan to refresh this, and because we haven't had a consultant, we're kind of sitting back on this and haven't gotten a go on it. But I think we look at the plan and what's in it, we look at the recommendations, we look at our feedback. I mean, I think the discussion on RRFB and pedestrian activities this morning was a good place to start, and then we hand it over to the consultant. As you look at the plan itself, I'd really like you to go through again, and I've written on all 85 pages of things that are out of date, of things that have been done, of things that haven't been done. So I want to get into that as a group. And I think there's no better way to do it other than tear into it from the start. I can give you an example of some of our accomplishments real quick. We've had bridges, we've got B-cycle, we changed our registration process. We have a better link with our street planning. We put lights on Seminole Highway, school education, rodeos, and link with our local partners like Bike Fitchburg, and they've done a lot of work around expanding our multi-use paths. So again, we've made a number of accomplishments. The key is, if we're going to move to the bigger issue of gold, the Bike League said the first thing we need to do was to, 1, have a firm commitment from the city on this, and 2, to update our plan. So without this getting done, we don't stand a chance of moving forward. And as I said, it's 8 years in arrears. So it's time to turn our focus on and go from there. As I said, I'm optimistic we can get a good document done, and I want to use the next 3 to 4 months with this committee to move this forward. So I'll stop right there and see if anybody has any comments, particularly people that served on the last one, like Andy and Joe.
One quick comment I'll throw that you didn't throw in terms of accomplishments was the creation of this commission.
Yep.
This body didn't exist during our last go around with it, and that was one of the key recommendations, is we need a permanent bike and ped committee to review things.
Okay, thank you. Joe, or I hate to put you on the spot, you got any, you sat on this, any comments from your end?
No comments on my end. I agree that it's time to make a review. It's time to put the things that we recommend into action and figure out which things are viable and which things are less viable.
So, thank you, Joe. That's a good segue. So your second assignment is going to be to look at all the recommendations that are at the back of the document around page 82 to 85, and we did a roll-up of what's been accomplished and not accomplished. So you should have that in the documents I sent you. And I think we start from there and go one by one by one to move it forward. The other piece is that a lot of the pictures are even out of date, but we can roll that up differently as we go forward. Phil, you look like you're going to say something there.
Only when there's a good break.
Okay, I'm going to break.
Okay, so Mark, I think we did talk about this when we met about a month ago. But one of the things that we did to try and make this, some of the comments that we reflected from a couple of the firms we reached out to that had accessed the bid back in February but didn't submit a proposal, was that they felt that the scope and budget for this plan were a little bit out of alignment. So one of the things we did was reduce a couple of the eventual consultant. We reduced a couple of the meetings that they would be expected to present to. We also took some of the background research and said, you know what, we're going to put that in the hands of a steering committee. And unfortunately, Mark was already putting the wheels in motion to make that steering committee happen, so that aligned well. So one thing that we're going to be asking a steering committee to do is to, as Mark mentioned, look at some of those, what has been accomplished, what hasn't. But also there are a number of other related city plans and county plans, and for anybody who has the time and interest, I'll certainly be doing some of this myself. We'd like to provide some of that background to the consultants so they don't have to dig through documents they may not already be familiar with. And so things like the county transportation plan and the city's parks and open space plan that's being developed right now, just kind of trying to make sure that when we release this new bike and pedestrian plan, it's up to date, not just with what was accomplished from the bike and ped plan in 2017, but also is there anything else that we need to make sure we incorporate to align with other existing plans. So there will be a little bit of, I know that there are some things that Mark's kind of going to have as these are definite tasks for the steering committee. There's a little bit of this that's also kind of additional, we'll call it extra credit homework, I guess, if anybody feels able to help tackle that as well.
I agree with everyone.
This is Jim.
Go ahead, Jim.
So you mentioned that limiting the scope of who the consultant will be presenting this to, and kind of where they're. Do you envision the consultant kind of seeking input, kind of interviewing either as a group or individually members of this commission? Do you envision them presenting this commission? Where do you see that interaction?
So what we put in the RFP was that they would have one working session with the Bike and Ped Commission. That they would give 4 public presentations, so 1 to this group, 1 to Plan Commission, 1 TTC, and 1 Common Council, and then an optional public meeting to gather stakeholder input. We didn't put anything in the RFP about individual interviews or anything like that. We could certainly, when we get to the interview stage with them, we could say if they'd be open to that. It does mean additional time, and so we want to be careful about asking too much time from them. If we're probably not going to have a proposal where they're just giving us a time and materials contract, but still, you can only ask often for so many extra hours on one task before it starts to cut away at other things they're doing. So I'm not sure that we'll get into individual interviews like that, but at least a working session with this commission is on the is part of the plan.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So Phil, back to your comments. I concur with everything you said, and the reason we're starting to move forward is we've been restructured since March, and I think that we can do this homework before we have a consultant on board. There is no reason we can't, and I've talked to the other city leaders that are in support of that as well, and I just want us to get us going. And if we reach a point where we're missing something, then that's fine, or we need more. But I think getting us going and looking at this current plan is the place to start. And even hearing what we heard today from both from Ross and other committee members and Jim is where we need to go. So again, I think looking at what we've sent out and then tying it back together for our meeting in September, I'll work with Phil to give some structured agenda time and go through this piece by piece. The other piece is that my time is going to free up dramatically in September, and I pledged to both Phil and Chad and Julia that I would give them what time was needed as a volunteer to help move this forward. I think, as I said, it's a building block for us as a commission. It will give us some credibility and give us some focus points down the road. So, yes, Kelly. Oh, Andy, go ahead. Thank you.
I guess another piece from the last time we did this, I think one thing that we utilized, and maybe part of the kind of cost consciousness of it, we did do public hearings and public listening sessions and charrettes and all that, but we also had a GIS-based map that was online, and people could actually go out and identify, like, on the map specific intersections and specific barriers that they found in Fitchburg, as well as just kind of submitting comments. And I don't want to speak for Dawn or Joe and other people who are on it, but honestly, I think we got significantly more feedback and better feedback from that than we ever did in the public meetings. Like, I'm not saying we shouldn't have public meetings and listening sessions, but I think just the nature of it, that this map was up there for several months. As you're out riding and you come up to an intersection and realize, hey, this could be better, you can just go out and do it sort of in the moment or an hour later, as opposed to we're coming together for 90 minutes to have a listening session, just flood us with all of your concerns and ideas. And then once we do that, we're done. I think it was just sort of that, like, organic nature of how the map worked. But also it had the advantage of it didn't really require a ton of staff time, because it just sat there 24/7 ready to take any feedback that people might have. And, it wasn't a consultant on the clock. So just kind of a thought moving forward that I think whatever we do, we should incorporate something similar to that, both just in terms of the quality of the feedback and, frankly, it's just kind of a cost savings measure.
Yeah, thanks. I'll definitely talk to Dakota, our GIS specialist, about whether that's something he could do. Do you know, Andy, if that's something that our consultant community design group did last time, or if we did that internally?
The consultant did it, but honestly, with the advancements in Google Maps, like, there's no reason we wouldn't do it ourselves. I think at the time it was just new enough that I don't know that city staff wanted to tackle it.
Sure. Yeah, I've definitely I'll have to talk to Dakota about it. I've volunteered him for a little bit of help with our maps for this anyway, but I'll see if that seems like something he could tackle.
I think it's an excellent idea too, Phil. So if we could figure out a way to get that going now or sooner rather than later, we can get started, because that will save consultant money, time, and as Andy said, if it just sits out there. I mean, I know when you did the sustainability plan, everybody got a note you want to fill out, and what do you think about it? When we did the bike plan for Gold, we had 150 people respond to the bike league in that survey, and I think that roughly we had over 80 of them said these streets are safe to ride on. There were 10 that said they weren't safe, and we need to figure out what they meant by that and where those were as we look at this. That's just an example, but that stuff came through surveys, so not public meetings.
Yep. And one thing we'll want to make sure of this time, and this will be something to talk about as the steering committee goes forward, when I looked at the survey, and this was an issue with the sustainability plan as well, obviously it's not something that there's an easy solution to, but the responses from the survey in the 2017 bike and pedestrian plan were not demographically representative for the whole city. There are definitely some portions of the city, especially areas where we know there are gaps in the bike and pedestrian network, where we didn't get as many comments received. So that's something that just be good to think about, other ways that we can make sure to engage everyone in the city on whatever communication we're doing here.
Good point. Are there other comments about the process moving forward? I really don't think we're going to dig into this in too much detail today, but I just wanted to lay out the ground rules and where I see this going and making sure that we're all on the same page. So if you're not, let me know. Okay, so the only assignment other than looking at what's been sent out and getting ready for the September meeting is to assign Phil to figure out, can we put you call it a GIS map, Andy, is that right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Correct. Maybe.
Go ahead.
Maybe just a question for Phil. So when the South Stoner neighborhood plan was out there, there was a similar map. I guess who did that? Was that
my guess is Dakota. I'd have to chat with him or somebody in the planning department on that. But I mean, probably Dakota did that.
I mean, honestly, it'd be something similar to that. Just it would be the entire city as opposed to that couple hundred acres.
Yeah. And we're going to have to do substantial map updates anyway, just because, even beyond the fact that our network has changed a little bit, we've incorporated those portions of the town of Madison. So there are some substantial mapping needs for this plan, and we'll just kind of roll that up into them.
Well, assignment number 3, if any of you want to share what you see are deficiencies in our current pedestrian or biking structure around the city right now, get them to me and I'll try and put them in a laundry list for our September meeting, because I can probably list off 8 or 10 things, and I know all of you others can too. So just get us the feedback of where we need to start, and then it will help us move all this forward. Because again, I think serving on this commission, I get a lot of feedback, and I've heard about the RRFBs for a long time. So I need to thank Ross, the city, and Phil for what they've done moving that forward. So again, if you can identify deficiencies, and if you can look at the recommendations of the plan in our document by the next meeting, that's where we'll start, and hopefully we'll have a consultant identified. And then Phil, if you can get the GIS map out. I don't really want to go into any more details today, other than if you just look at what we sent out, the only other things, the other thing we didn't talk about that we can look at in the plan is all the APB parking that we have added since this last plan. Every one of our community and neighborhood parks, Scott Endel and the city have funded to put in approved parking, most of which wasn't there before other than at McKee. So we've made some good positive comments. We've had some things with the city planning department, Phil's department, about new developments, about putting in approved parking. So again, we're beginning to put pieces in place as we move forward. This is a long-term journey. It's not going to be all done tomorrow as we move forward. So I don't have anything else to add. Phil, do you want to add anything else other than keeping us advised?
I don't think so. Yeah, we'll just keep we'll keep apprised of things as we go forward. I am going to share over in the chat function here the RFP that we did release, just so you're all aware. You can check that out and see what we put in there that we expect from the consultant. I think we shared this with you already back in February. There's just a couple of updates to the scope of work, as I mentioned. And then we kind of felt like maybe we were a little bit too explicit on what we expected in terms of staff qualifications, so we softened that a bit. Otherwise, it's pretty much the same as the RFP back in February, but Jim, I'm sure that you haven't had a chance to scan that.
Yeah, can you just send it to me via email, because the chat function
I will also send I'll send the RFP via email, and I don't know if we have any other documents that are relevant to share right now, but I'll make sure that gets sent out.
And
no, nothing else, Mark.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Then I'm going to move into the department side. You got your 4 assignments for the next meeting on September 3rd. We'll move into report for departments. And first up is Alder Maldonado. Alder Joe, I would ask that you at the next council meeting let your colleagues know that we're moving forward on this planning, if you wouldn't mind. And the floor is yours.
Absolutely.
Okay. So
I don't have any major updates.
Okay.
So I'll just leave it at that.
I think on the good news front, Joe appeared in my email today with Gabriella at the ribbon cutting or the dedication last week for the neighborhood hub. It is going to have both B cycles over there, up on Greenway Cross, and a bike pump track. So again, something else that we can show our commitment to biking in the city. And Joe, thank you for your support for that. And I love seeing you.
Yeah, I can't believe it slipped by my radar. Yes, we were both, along with I think 3 other alders and the mayor, at the hub groundbreaking. I'm incredibly thrilled that this is moving forward.
It's a neat thing. So good work to you guys for taking that forward for us. And there'll be a bike impact, and we've got to be certain, I think, as we look at that pedestrian community, that pedestrian activity around that area too, Jim, is important as we move into the future. So anything else, Joe, you have to add?
Sorry, no, I have nothing to add.
Okay. Then Phil, do you have any further update?
You know, the one thing I didn't mention that I could is just with B-Cycle, it's been a bit slow trying to get the rest of the phase 2 expansion going this year. We've got almost all of the remaining sites identified for B-Cycle for our phase 2 expansion funded by that TAP grant. I submitted site plans for 3 of them a few weeks ago. Those have been approved internally. So one I'm waiting for. So we're looking at the Capital City Trail parking lot on Assain near McCoy. That one we're going to enter into a partnership with the Dane County, since it's their property, that basically it just gives us they're giving us permission to manage a site there, and we're delegating most of that management to B-Cycle, but we've got to get that that contract signed. We're looking at the roundabout at Williamsburg Way, just west of Verona Road. For that, I'm waiting on B-Cycle to submit a permit application to Public Works because it's right of way. So that needs to be approved by our Public Works department. And then the third one is by the new hub. So the final design scope for the hub does include B-Cycles, as Mark mentioned, but of course right now there's nothing there. So the city owns a little bit of property across the street on the south side of Traceway, and we're going to put some B-Cycle docks there with temporary base plates until we're ready to include them in a concrete pad with the hub. So those three site plans have been submitted. The chamber and B-Cycle are looking at a couple other locations. And just kind of waiting for them to get those site plans submitted. Hopefully by the end of this month, we've got some more B-Cycle stations installed, but kind of waiting on action right now from B-Cycle to get going there.
And just to add to that, Phil, I've got a meeting with B-Cycle on Thursday that is with their leadership to make certain we're moving on this the right way. There's still some sponsorship that needs to be pulled together. And I'm working with my chamber hat on as well to try and identify some other folks to support it. I'm optimistic we'll get that. I want to add one more, that if you've been out on the trails, you need to keep an eye out for our 4 signs that we purchased a year ago that the city gave us money for, that talked about courtesy and safety on the trails. They've all disappeared. I'm not making this up, guys. I wish I was. But we had them at the crossing in McKee. We had them at Military Ridge going south towards Verona. We had them as you came in around the Velo Underground, and then we had one over by Assain and McCoy. They've all disappeared. I have checked with Dane County, who mows the trails, and I've checked with Jorian and Scott Endel in the Parks Department. Nobody seems to know where they are. So if you see them, let me know, because I've been out in the trails quite a bit the last 2 weeks, and they disappeared about a week ago. And I think Dane County has them, but I've already asked them, and I'm not going to push it any harder, but they're gone. So if you're out there, anyway, I'm done. So
yeah, I gave Dane County. I gave some Dane County contact information to Scott Endel as well to reach out to them, and I'll make sure that he's followed up, and if he hasn't, maybe I'll message them so at least they're not hearing from you a second time.
Well, there we go. There's a guy named Jeff Prey or something that you gave me his email, yep. And he got back to me and said his folks didn't have them, but I can only guess that when they were mowing, they picked them up. That's my only guess. In fact, they're all gone. Yeah, I mean, I even went.
That they're the ones that maintain all that, which they do.
Yeah, I even went and looked at the bushes around there, and so, but they're gone. So if they reappear, we'll let you know, or if you see them, let me know. So, anyway. Nothing else from you, Phil? Okay.
Nope, that's all.
I will move into the last item on the agenda, which is a Bike Fitchburg update. There is nobody from Bike Fitchburg here. I can give you a quick update from what I know. There's active participation going on for Cycling Without Age. And with Mark is leading that, Mark and Carol, and they're making progress. They're getting some information out. They put a plan together, and again, it's one of those things that will make cycling better for the city as it goes forward. The second thing is that they got a rodeo plan for the police night out, which is, I think, August 14th. It's on the city's website. And then lastly, they're having their pick-me-up at the border ride that will be going on. And then tomorrow we have our 4th ride of the summer for the senior center for the Ride for Joe. So in lieu of nobody here from Bike Fitchburg, that's the update as I see it. And those are all good things, and they all blend in with the fact that we're responsible for one thing area, they're accountable for another, and the more that we work together and come together, the better it is for everybody who moves around the city, livability. So that's that update. Lastly, it's time for announcements, and I'll get you out of here early. Our next meeting is September 3rd at 7:30. You've got those 4 assignments. I will send you a summary as the chair of what I'd like you to do again for that meeting, and if you got any feedback, get it back to me before then, please. And I want to thank you for your service so far. As we move forward, it's going to be very important that we are seen as both the leaders of this and listening to our peers in the city. And again, Jim, I look forward to you getting engaged with us and working with us, and we will put you to work. We got a lot to do. So is there any other comments or announcements?
I've got one, Mark.
Yes, Ryan.
Yeah, so I'm the co-chair of a bike group called Cap City Cyclists. We do social rides around the city of Madison, and we have an upcoming event in September, just to kind of let everyone know about. It's called the 100 Miles of Nowhere. It's a route that I have done personally every year for about the last decade, raising funds for different organizations around the community and nonprofits. And Cap City Cyclists as an organization this year is going to be putting it on. It's going to be on September 14th. So that's a Saturday, September 14th. And the idea is it's a ride that is a bike century that goes exactly nowhere. It's a somewhat ridiculous route that challenges riders to ride that distance but not actually go anywhere. And so we raise funds for the different community organizations through entry fees for registration as well as soliciting just external donations. So that's going to go on there. And this year, our course is going to take us on a loop that butts up right against Leopold Elementary School that takes part of the Cannonball Path. So we will be right next to the edge of the city of Fitchburg. Just an FYI, that's going to be happening, and we are going to be rolling out all the information in the next week or so to allow people to start registering and keeping an eye out for that event.
Ryan, would you please send the committee the link, please?
Absolutely.
I have a question. Is it on trails, or are you getting out in the roads and heading south?
So our route is actually going to be a loop that's just a little bit less than a mile in length. So it's, like I said, it's 100 miles of nowhere. So we're going to go nowhere, but we're going to spend a long time getting there. Okay. And so yes, part of it is on the section of Cannonball Path that goes right past Leopold Elementary and butts up against the mountain bike and pump track areas there. And then the other part of it kind of loops around Post Road, Churchill Drive, and then back around to the Cannonball Path. So it's a very short course, but it's also very fun.
Okay, well, thank you. Get us the info, and we can spread it around the groups. The other thing is just an FYI, That's the date of the UW-Wisconsin, the UW-Alabama football game, 11 o'clock. You might want to avoid Camp Randall area.
Sure, we won't be anywhere near there, but yes.
Okay. All right, and thank you, Ryan. Any other announcements? Okay, well, hearing none, I will entertain a motion to adjourn 25 minutes early.
I move.
So moved by Kelly. Is there a second?
Second.
I didn't. Who made the second?
Second.
Second by Ryan. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Same sign.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign.
Hey.
Hearing none, we are adjourned. So you'll get assignments for this, and I thank you for your upcoming work you're going to be doing to make both cycling and pedestrian activities better for our city. Thank you.
Good. Thanks all.
Thanks all. Have a good day.
Thanks all.
Thank you.